Thank you so much for joining me into the Life Gets Messy Zoom series. I am so excited to be with you today and grateful for your time and interest in this series. As you may already know, I'm a family law attorney and partner with Fox Rothschild. Having practiced family law for nearly 2 decades, I have had a front row seat into the lives of couples and families who are going through what is most likely one of the most difficult times of their lives. Getting divorced, even in the best of circumstances, is painful, difficult, and sometimes gut-wrenching. Yet once these couples and their families can move forward beyond the arduous divorce process, there is an opportunity for life transformation and happiness. They can tap into strengths and qualities they never knew they had. I have been fortunate enough to have a front row seat and witness some of these transformations firsthand. Many get the chance to begin again and build new, healthier, and happier relationships. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's Life is Messy Zoom series. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so happy to be with you today and grateful for your time and interest in this ongoing series. So for full disclosure, I am not following the episode order that was originally sent out in the flyer. So if you're one of those people that is following that flyer, I'm going to apologize in advance, but I felt compelled to talk about these virtues today, and in a few moments, you'll understand more about why that is. So today we're going to talk about the virtues of justice, impartiality, even-handedness, and fairness. And why, you may be asking, am I so compelled to talk about those virtues today? So my team and I are in the process and have been deeply entrenched in trial preparation for the last week or so. We have a matter, a divorce action, going to trial next week. And because I'm in the zone of that preparation and I don't want to break it, I thought that it would be perfect timing to talk to you about these virtues, because I have been thinking about them as I have been doing my trial preparation and wondering specifically for this client why they are at this point where they are actually having a trial. So statistically, the courts tell us that 95% of all family law cases, divorces, post-divorce issues settle, and that only a very small percent, 5 to 3% of those issues actually have a trial. And why is that? Well, because number one, these issues are so deeply personal to the people who are involved. It's your life. Secondly, though, it's extremely expensive, and people have better things to do with their money than spend it on legal fees and fighting with one another. They want to save for their kids' educations or their dream trips around the world or whatever, their retirement, whatever it may be. So in reality, very few of our cases go to trial, and that's a good thing. That's a great thing. I love a good trial. It's definitely not like as you see it on television, but it's stimulating and it's interesting for the attorney. It's all the things that you learn about while you're training to become a lawyer, while you're in law school. But certainly in this area of the law, you see the actual effects of the toll that it takes on families. You see the psychological effects and the emotional effects, and definitely the financial impact. So we try to avoid trial where we can. And so the case that I'm preparing for is one of those cases that could have been avoided. It's a couple. They were married for 9 years. One of, to me, the saddest pieces of this case is that it's been pending in the court system for 5 years. How does that happen? It happens because there are ways to manipulate deadlines in the court system. And our court system is the imperfect, best model of judicial decision-making that we have. And perhaps that the whole world has, frankly, but that's my personal opinion. So the husband, I represent the wife in this case. The husband initially, I can't speak today, but 5 years ago did not want to be divorced, did not want to get divorced. And so he did anything and everything that he could think of to stall and delay the divorce. Couple that with the ever-changing political climate of here in the Garden State, where we have had a statewide plague of judicial shortages for judges, meaning that we cannot get our politicians on either side of the aisle to reach an agreement as to judicial appointments. So we are short judges in every county in the state of New Jersey. Traditionally, although not always, but more often than not, when a new judge is appointed to the bench, they initially will sit in the family court. And so it is that, and then they are moved around sometimes after a certain period of time, or if other judges get appointed. So they, where we do have judges that are being appointed, they are brand new, and they don't necessarily have to have family law experience while they were in private practice. It's not a requirement that judges practice, sit in the area where they practiced when they were private attorneys. So sometimes judges come to the bench and they have never dealt with a family law case, except maybe reading about one or two in a textbook in law school some time ago. So that adds to the complications of things because they are learning. And yes, they go through training, and yes, the Office of Administrative Courts does all that they can to make sure that the judges are very well prepared, and they generally receive a mentor in the courthouse, which is another judge who has more experience in that practice area. But still, there is a learning curve to be had, and that makes the job of the attorney all that more important, where we are doing all that we can, or should be doing all that we can, to educate these new judges about the law and the changes to the law and how they should apply the law to the specific facts that we are presenting to them. So all of these factors combined are what caused this case to go on for 5 years. In the midst of that, the husband lost his job because of a disciplinary action. He was in a type of job that you could lose for disciplinary actions in a public service role. So that further complicated things, and he used that loss and subsequent administrative appeals of that termination to, again, delay and stall the case. So now 5 years later, there are 2 children who were very young when this all started. One is starting high school, or just started high school, and the others, they've grown substantially. So their lives have been in this state of flux for 5 years, which is very complicated. I think it also adds to the psychological and mental perspective that parties bring to a case when they're trying to reach a resolution. It's almost, in some instances, that people become so used to living in this chaotic state of flux that actually finalizing the divorce is scarier to them than what they have lived with for the last 5 years. And again, I can't speak, but I wouldn't be shocked if that's kind of behind the scenes, psychosomatically, what the husband is dealing with, because we have made multiple offers to settle the case, some of which have been very generous just to get this matter completed with. Recommendations from mediators that my client was willing to accept. All of those things very reasonable from our perspective. Not only does he deny them, he just simply won't respond to them. And it is my belief, and again, I can't confirm this, that it's part of his psyche to punish her for actually having divorced him. And so these are the personalities of who we are dealing with. So, we're painting this picture to make the judge understand that, yes, there are facts about what's in bank accounts and how much certain things are worth, certainly, but there is an emotional and psychological aspect behind every single one of these cases that plays into people's behavior, people's conduct. And that is something that's relevant for a judge to consider, to the extent that a judge is making assessments with regard to a custody or parenting time agreement, not the issue in this case, believe it or not, and this is why I am led to say some of the things I just said to you all, they settled completely all issues about custody and parenting time within 5 months of filing the complaint for divorce. So they have had what generally is one of the bigger disagreements between people, what causes a lot of the discord and a lot of the money to be spent, because if you can't agree, you have to get experts involved and they are very costly, but certainly worth it because they do a fine job of honing in on these particular issues. But they didn't have that in this case, which is why it's even more enlightening to me that we haven't settled financial issues. Their house that they shared was sold 3 years ago, and all of the money that they received from that sale was divided. So what are we really fighting about at this point? And so that, and then my client has that perspective. She is, you know, not excited, certainly is not the word I would use, about having to go to trial, taking time off from work, devoting time, you know, on the weekends to prepare for the trial and gather documentation and to basically relive and remember all of the things that have gone on over the past 5 years. It's a lot for any person, and she's paying lawyers to help her do all of that, where she's already been paying for 5 years as issues have come up. So those are who I'm dealing with, and that's what I believe to be the problem. And so when we're talking about the virtues of justice, impartiality, even-handedness, and fairness, how does that come into play in the divorce aspect? So I like to tell clients early on when I work with them that, you know, you may be angry and you may be hurt, and those emotions are valid, and you should process them, but they should not be what guides you in making decisions that not only impact you as a person, but impact your spouse, perhaps the parent of your children, but someone certainly, even if not that you spent years generally with as a partner, because there was one point in time where you didn't dislike, or dare I say, hate this individual so much. And if you're going to move through the process as quickly and as cost efficiently and as, what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, I just had a little lapse there. If you're going to move through the process so that you could come out with dignity, then you need to treat each other fair. Because at the end of the day, if you've done the right thing and you're being fair, then you have nothing to regret, because you're moving forward and you're moving past this and onto bigger and better and brighter things for your future. And certainly we all want to be in a happy and healthy relationship. Part of our, you know, big message here. Get it? Big message, Tara? That was funny. But generally, you know, certainly a good message for all of us to live with, because there's a lot that goes on in the world that impacts us every day. And we want these virtues to not only be what we live by, but we also want those around us to do that. So, you know, if you're working with an attorney, you want to make sure that they're acting in your best interest and that they are, you know, thinking about justice and not thinking about how they can turn a case to drag things on even longer, to make things more difficult. You want them to help you solve problems and not create problems. When you're going before the judge, you want to help them understand how they can dole out justice and be even-handed and be fair and make sure that everybody is treated the same. And, you know, working with the right attorney, if you're going to use an attorney for this process, is so important to getting you to that end goal. So, you know, how I come into this picture is that we have, you know, a fairly new judge who is going to be hearing this case next week. And he's got certainly some experience, but certainly a large part of my job is to make sure that he sees the facts, that they're all presented to him, that, you know, I follow the procedure. There are rules that the court requires attorneys to follow. There are evidentiary rules that we have to submit to, but that when we're following those rules and putting forth the facts and the evidence on behalf of our client, that we're demonstrating why the things that we are asking this court to do is not only right under the law, but also doles out justice, is even-handed and fair. Because family court sits in the court of equity, and equity is being fair. It's being equitable. It is not treating everybody the same, but making sure that people are treated fairly, and that justice is doled out in a way that doesn't hurt either party, unless there are extenuating circumstances where you can show that somebody should be given a greater advantage or a greater benefit because of such egregious behavior on the other part. And that is part of what we intend to show next week when we have this trial. So with all of that said, does anybody have any questions with regard to the process or some of the things that I just talked about?
Brittany, you might want to unmute everyone.
I can unmute. I just don't see any hands or anything. Let's see.
Don't be shy. I'm pretty surprised that I've seen people that I know drag it for 5 or 6 years. I mean, it has to be unbelievable quantities of money that are wasted.
Unbelievable quantities of money. And I think that even people who have infinite, I'll call it, amounts of money, it is so disheartening. It is so aggravating. They are so angry, and rightfully so, to have to be in that position where they have spent these types of this amount of money fighting again about we're talking about a finite pool of assets and issues here that we're fighting about. Finite.
What happens if they run out of money before they get divorced?
Well, people do. They file for bankruptcy, and then they're left without. Generally, they're left without legal representation because lawyers and law firms, while we can take on pro bono cases, there are requirements. Generally, most law firms and most organizations that provide free legal services, they have like an economic means test that you have to pass. So if you were a middle class, New Jersey family, and because of your actions or the actions of your spouse, you've lost all of your money and you're in a position where you're filing for bankruptcy, if you're earning income, you're not going to qualify for any of those programs. So they really are left unserviced, which is another strategy that I have seen, not in a long time, because I think courts are more tuned into people doing things like that, and a good lawyer will get in early on in the case and make that stop. I am not my client's first attorney. She came to me about a year ago after she had had several years with her prior attorney and nothing was happening. And I think in her eyes, she thought maybe a change of representation would change the tone of the case or move things a little bit. And I do think that it did, but I think that ultimately, based on all of the discussions, the negotiations, the outside advice, again, from mediators and everybody who's involved in every case that tries to get people to settle their issues, the underlying tone is that he is just not going to do that because he's got a different agenda here. This is really a way for him to exact his pound of flesh, so if you will, from her, and he'll do it at any expense. And there are people with that mentality, not only in divorces, in all types of legal situations. You see it everywhere. So I think that it's unfortunate. The goal, though, for her is so that, while she'll never recover these last 5 years and the emotional and the stress that all of this has put on her, that there can be some sort of financial recovery for her based on these actions. And, even though she's been going through this for several years, she's never been in a trial. So in addition to all the money and the expense and the aggravation, she's also now, I'm certain, feeling a level of stress that she's going to have to testify and remember things, and you don't get a cheat sheet necessarily. So I spent this weekend, you know, with my team, and next weekend I will be with her, kind of making sure she understands and she's feeling comfortable and she's remembering things, and that when questions are asked of her, she knows, she feels comfortable and confident in her answers. There's a lot, I mean, this is what I'm saying about trial being so expensive. There is a tremendous amount of work that goes on behind the scenes that certainly judges and lawyers know, but I don't think that clients often think about until they get hit with a huge bill.
So on his side, is this the same attorney he's had the whole time?
Yes.
And so would you say that his attorney is milking this situation?
No, it's actually not one of the cases where I would say that. I think his attorney would like to settle the case. I think his attorney thinks that what we have offered has been reasonable. I think he just has a very difficult client who he cannot control, and I don't mean that negatively. I don't know that anybody would be able to at this point. And it goes back to, you know, they've lived in this state of flux for so long. I don't know that he even thinks about it, right? Within 5 years, for all intents and purposes, they've moved on. You know, I don't know about romantically, but certainly life has changed tremendously in the last 5 years, and everything that tied them to, you know, I think in his head, they are married on paper at this point, not realizing that there are still, I'll call them loose ends, but they're not. I mean, they have impact that need to be addressed. Almost like an out of sight, out of mind. I'm not giving that to her. Oh, that's what she wants? No, I'm not doing that.
So he's all about the win, getting the win.
He's all about, exactly. I do. I think that's the problem that we're facing here.
So that's a tough strategy to go against, right?
Well, so what do? I mean, you call his bluff. Because we've tried everything else. I mean, she's essentially given, her settlement positions have moved tremendously from what they were initially when I was not representing her. So I'm not going to say that she's given in completely, because, you know, that wouldn't be smart for her, but certainly well further than where she was initially, and beyond fair, where now the scale has tipped more so in his favor, because at the end of the day, the money she will save in the trial prep makes sense in order to be done with all of this. And even that is not satisfactory to him. So what do you do? There is no other strategy. There's no smoking gun. It's not a criminal case where you can say, you know, the glove doesn't fit type of a story. I say call his bluff tongue in cheek, but you go to trial and you put it at the hands of an impartial trier of fact who's going to, you know, listen to testimony and review evidence that's presented and hear legal arguments and hopefully make the right decision to bring her closer to whole. She'll never be 100%, because that never happens in any type of legal, you know, case dealing in the family part, but certainly helping her get back to where he is. And I tell you this, that even if that happens, I don't know that this personality type would stop. I have seen in other cases where it doesn't matter. In their own head, someone with this type of ego or personality flaw will blame everybody but themselves. They will find a reason to blame everybody but themselves for why things ended up where they were. And they will find somebody else who will, you know, maybe take it on to appeal, or, you know, and continue the process. So as long as there's some sort of financial backing, which we've all kind of been questioning where that's coming from at this point, you know, this sadly may not be the end, even though she may get the things that she's asking for.
So he's a narcissist by definition then?
By definition.
And then the question would be, the judge's decision, at least until there's appeal, is final, right? So
Yes.
The judge will weigh this. So are you at a bit of an advantage? We refer to you as iron fist in a velvet glove. And those of you who've been on these calls before, as beautiful and sweet and loving as Sandra can be in this environment, she can equally be fierce and frightening
Yeah.
when she's behind the desk at a trial to the benefit of her client. But you mentioned that you don't think that the lawyer on the other side is out. So is he going to go a little bit kinder to you because he thinks maybe this client is overreaching?
You know, I don't know. He certainly, you know, we certainly have a good professional tone to our communications, you know, and we've had some off the record kind of conversations that have been helpful. This attorney is a good attorney, so I don't know that, you know, he won't do his job to prepare the case, but I think he's, you know, you're left with the facts that you have, and you know, you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. I think that's where he may be, where he's going to try to put lipstick and some other rouge and some highlighter on his pig, but I don't know at the end of the day if that's going to change the facts, because they are what they are. And we had a motion 2 Fridays ago on a different issue, because at the very last minute he tried, after the trial had been scheduled, he filed a motion seeking to do something pretty drastic, such as amend his original pleading. So now this original pleading's been 5 years old, and now he's looking to amend it for a new claim of relief. And the judge, rightfully, I think, saw right through it and was pretty tough during that oral argument on husband and his attorney. So I'm hoping that that set a good tone for, you know, I'm not going to deal with shenanigans during the trial. I kind of already see where you're coming from and kind of how you're playing this, if you will. You know, I almost got the feeling that he was saying, you know, I have my eye on you. I'm going to hear what everybody has to say because that's my job, excuse me, impartial, even-handed, but I don't know how far it's going to take him, because the facts are, I mean, so it's crazy to say this because she has good facts, but you know, I've said this to clients and they're like, yeah, where does that get me? I've spent all of this money to get here for, you know, for that. Like, and it's hard because during the course of time, judges don't tell you, you know, they're not, it's again, as a court of equity, they are not inclined. I mean, there's always the offshoot to this statement, but generally judges are not inclined to, in a motion setting, or when you're there for a case management conference, even if you say like, you know, she hasn't paid child support to dad in 6 months, they're not going to get out their gavel and start screaming at the person who hasn't paid. That's not how they conduct themselves in a courtroom. So people are feeling all of these injustices for however long a period of time is, and they don't see anything happen for it. So they give up on the legal system themselves. And when clients say to me, like, well, when is the judge going to see that? You know, and I say, the judge only really sees those things at a trial, but you don't want to get there. You don't want to be, you don't want to be in a position where you're having a trial, because then you're emotionally, financially, you're in a much worse place. So let's try to resolve the issue now without worrying about him or her being punished, so to speak. But this is all of those things that people worry about. This is the time when it happens, and it's stressful. It's stressful.
So
for
we have
clients,
one more minute left, because we're going to do, moving forward, a shortened version. Obviously, we could talk for an hour, but we've decided to make this shorter and more succinct. So do you want to leave us with some virtue wisdom for as you motivate yourself to take this trial on and show that man some justice?
Oh, yes. That is the most exciting part for me. So I usually leave you all with reading recommendations, and I thought perfect time to recommend. So for anybody who knows me well knows that I am a Ruth Bader Ginsburg fan, not necessarily because of her politics, but because of her story and all that she demonstrates, and the example that she sets for women all over the world about what you can accomplish in an era where women were not going to Harvard Law School or becoming Supreme Court justices. So talking about the virtues of justice and all of that, I would recommend the notorious B.I.G. I just finished it, and it's really fascinating. And the other book that I thought, and I think I've recommended this before, but I think it does fit into this, and it's a big one, so you need to read it in pieces, probably, is The 48 Laws of Power. I have it up here, hold on. It's Robert Greene, and it has little tidbits that talk about the virtues and kind of how you can put them into play in your everyday life. So those are my recommendations for this month. And, you know, I leave you with that. I imagine that if you're listening today, you're someone who has either been through a divorce or is contemplating a divorce or has a friend or a family member, coworker who has come to you with this kind of predicament. And so you're here to get some information, and that's great. When you're in that type of a boat, you should reach out for a lifesaver. And this is a good start to getting that information. But it can only take you so far. So taking the next steps means contacting a lawyer who you feel comfortable with to get specific information with regard to the specifics of your case. If you think I'm a good fit, you can email me at sfava@foxrothschild.com, and I can put you on my calendar. You can also get some more valuable information on my website, www.asksandrafava.com, or follow me on Twitter at DivorceNJLaw. And lastly, you can like my Facebook page, Sandra Fava. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope everyone has a great day, and I look forward to seeing you next month.